Today I'm going to tell you about the 5 lessons I learned while sailing on Lake Michigan on a windy day and losing my steering. Stay until the end of this video to see how the quadrant and wire steering system works on a Pearson 424 catch. Silver Heels was purchased in 2019, and this was like the 3rd sail I had taken her on. I had good crew. I had been sailing with this one couple for a number of years, so really familiar with them, and there was a second couple that joined us who had very good sailing skills, and we were getting along very well. We had met them the previous month. So I felt very confident with the crew that we took out. It was going to be a windy day. This was the Chicago Air and Water Show day, and we knew that the wind was forecast to be higher, between 15 building up to 25 during that day. I did not want to anchor the boat in those conditions. I felt, with being a new owner of a sailboat, this is a heavy boat, you should be able to take it, but I just felt like it would be safer to be out in the sea state rather than try to anchor amidst a whole bunch of other sailors. And that turned out to be true because as the wind started building up, we could hear people calling on Channel 16 asking for help. Some of the other sailboats that were out there to view the event were having problems with their anchors. They weren't holding, they were bumping into other boats. There was a lot of chatter on Channel 16. Some people couldn't get their engines started in the wake of that. So the Coast Guard was extremely busy. Fortunately, there were a lot of emergency services available because this was a huge event, one of the biggest events on Lake Michigan any summer. And as we ourselves were starting to reef, that's when something happened to us. In the higher wind, the tension was significant on the rudder. I could feel the tension on the rudder, which is why we were going to reef. All of a sudden, the steering snapped. I was turning the helm and nothing was happening. I had lost responsiveness of the helm. The helm was no longer connected to the rudder and I had lost steerage. So I called out and asked the crew members to douse the mainsail, and this is lesson number 1, and I got a rude lesson in sail balance. Sail balance is where the main and the jib work together to keep the boat going in a particular direction. And this was actually a lesson in the extreme of when you don't have sail balance, because when we dropped that main, the boat veered away from the wind immediately. The sail balance is gone. The aftmost sail is no longer working in conjunction with the foresail, and as a result, the wind just pushed the nose of the boat away. And we were now heading toward the event where all these boats were anchored. And we were a long way off, but it was unnerving to all of a sudden the boat just steered itself toward the event, which was not great, right? So we quickly brought this jib in. It took another few minutes, and then we lost momentum, we lost power, and we started bobbing out there in the lake. Now that we had control of the boat, the next step was to deploy the emergency tiller, and I knew exactly where this was. I had seen it when I bought the boat. I knew where it was. So we opened up the lazarette, we pulled out the emergency tiller, and the next thing is to get access to the rudder post so we could attach the emergency tiller to the rudder post and then steer it. But there was a plate on top of that, a stainless steel plate, and that stainless steel plate had not been used. It had gone years, we speculate, with disuse because it was completely corroded. We could not unscrew that plate. So we needed to back out the plate entirely. It was bolted on. There were 4 what were probably wood screws. So I went to get a Phillips head screwdriver. I had one, brought it back up. We tried to unscrew that. They wouldn't budge either. We ultimately had to, the next step was to get a drill and try to, easy out those screws or just drill into them to basically compromise the hardware itself to pull that plate off. And that's what we ended up doing. We used the drill into the screws in the plate and ultimately pull the whole plate off. So that gave us access. And this is lesson number 2. You absolutely have to have spares, safety equipment, tools. You need to be prepared on a boat for anything because you never know when you're going to be in a pickle. So even if you're a weekend sailor, you really have to think about what tools do I need on the boat, what safety equipment do I need on the boat, what spares do I need. That's incredibly important. This was just a reinforcement of that in practical form. Lesson number 2, have all the appropriate equipment on the boat ready to go. We turned on the motor, we put the boat in gear, and we noticed that the prop wash that was going along the rudder was washing along one side of the rudder in particular, and we had to hold the rudder in place against that wash. I'll tell you what, that was a big lesson. We all realized very quickly that that was difficult. We had the boat up to about 5-6 knots, 1,500 RPMs or so, and we could have backed off. We could have slowed down. It would have just been a longer ride, and we had to go at least 5 miles. But we kept it up at about 5 knots, and we just took shifts in holding that rudder in place for about 5 minutes. So the lesson we learned from that is make sure that your emergency tiller has a lash point. And after that experience, my friend helped me install an eye bolt onto that tiller. So in the future, if I were ever in that pickle again, I'd be able to lash it against some hardware, maybe to a winch, and just keep it in place that way, as opposed to using pure muscle power. So, and also gave me a good appreciation for the amount of load and leverage a wheel and quadrant system is providing. You know, the wheel, the helm that's connected to the system through basically a bicycle chain to wire, that is an extremely leveraged system that makes steering really easy. And when you're holding that tiller with very little leverage, it really makes you appreciate how much load the helm actually dissipates in terms of the leverage. We brought the boat back. It took well over an hour to bring it back. We steered it completely, taking 5-minute shifts per person, holding that tiller until we got back to the dock. The next step came with trying to understand what the problem was and ultimately fixing the problem. We took the compass off of the pedestal and got access into the steering pedestal, and we could see that the chain had just broke. So the chain was in 2 pieces. It had been draped over a gear wheel with sprockets, and the gear wheel was there and it worked fine. You could turn the helm and the gear wheel would rotate, but the chain was no longer on that wheel, and it was just in 2 pieces down below, so we had to pull that out. I ended up realizing this was an Edson steering system, and I went ahead and ordered a new appropriately sized Edson chain and wiring replacement kit. My friend came back and helped me install this kit, and we ended up replacing the old wire and chain with a new wire and chain and lubed it appropriately, got it all in place. It was an experience. And this leads me to lesson number 4. If you own a boat, you have to be comfortable with the idea of getting into DIY because being reliant on mechanics or repair people is just not a practical thing if you are planning on doing anything other than weekend sailing. And even then, even weekend sailors may be subject to a problem that they're going to have to solve. So by doing it yourself and replacing that system, in this case, my replacing that system with the help of another person really got me appreciative of how much value there is in that. Because doing it yourself, you really start to understand how the system works, and the next time you might be in a pickle, you just have a mental map of what might have failed. So doing it yourself is extremely important, and I took that away from this experience. From that point forward, I was resolved to do as much as I could myself when it came to repairs or fixing things on a sailboat. So lesson number 5 was the intimate familiarity I achieved from replacing that steering system, replacing specifically the chain and wire system that was the appropriate sized kit from Edson Marine for this particular vessel. So I'm going to share my insights of the steering system with you now. The mechanism underneath the compass and in the steering pedestal, the wheel is attached to a barrel with some bearings on it, and that rotates a gear with sprockets on it. And a chain is draped around that gear. So when you turn the wheel, it turns the gear, and that subsequently moves the chain either one way or the other. At the ends of each side of the chain are two wires, two independent wires. And those wires come out of the bottom of the steering pedestal where two sheaves are. They're like blocks that roll on a center pin. And two sheaves are there, and the wires feed. One wire feeds through one sheave and one wire feeds through the other sheave, and those sheaves kind of turn the wires toward other blocks, and ultimately those blocks turn the wires toward the quadrant. So the wires are fed back ultimately to the quadrant, and they are angled in such a way that pull the quadrant either to the starboard or to the port, right? So when they are properly attached to two metal dowels that are screwed onto the quadrant, then the attachment points pull that quadrant either left or right based on you turning the wheel. So when replacing the wire and cable system, we learned about the steering system in general, and we noticed some other problems. We noticed like one of the sheaves was loose or wobbly in its housing, and we ultimately had to replace a center pin for a particular sheave. We had to lubricate everything to make things nice and smooth. We had to replace, there are these two large blocks on either side of the quadrant, and it basically limits the extreme side of the quadrant. So if you're turning the helm super quick, ultimately you feel it bounce up against something. There are these large blocks that protect the fiberglass hull and absorb the shock of that quadrant coming over from one side or the other. And one of those blocks had disintegrated to a certain point. It wasn't completely useless, but it was, you could see that it needed some love. So we ultimately replaced that block, in addition to conducting some maintenance on some of the blocks, greasing up everything, connecting everything new. And in the end, we got everything up and working, and I decided to take the boat out on the following day to verify everything works. And I had a crew available, and we went to start taking the boat out, and I realized as I was taking the boat out from the dock that everything was wired opposite. So I was turning the helm in what I thought was going to be turning the boat to starboard, and what actually happened is that it was turning the boat to port. So we had wired everything together completely opposite. So I realized that I could try to compensate, but that was not going to be great. We brought the boat back to the dock, and I ended up having to rewire the whole thing all over again. And if I'll tell you what, that gives you intimate familiarity with the system when you have to do it all over again. And that's not the first project that has happened to me. But you know what? You've got to appreciate the experience, because it really reinforces how things work. And it also teaches you over time to be a lot more careful about understanding how things are set up to begin with, and using little telltales or tricks to make sure that when you take something apart, you can put it back together the way it should go back together. So that was a big lesson. In the end, it was really fun to learn about the steering system. I really want to thank my subscribers for your support. Thanks for tuning in and watching these videos and subscribing, to being a loyal fan. For those of you that stayed until the end of the video, I really appreciate that you stayed until the end. Please consider pressing that like button. That will really help the channel grow. This is Sailor Eric, and thanks for watching.